All right, what is going on? This is episode 6 of the podcast. I'm very excited for this one. This is actually a little bit different because it's outside of the bubble of typical high ticket sales that we usually come through with. So, this guy here in front of me, Elijah, so he is an incredible appointment setter. Actually, transitioned from the high ticket space. I think he was doing a mixture of closing and setting initially in the space, but then you made that transition directly into corporate, right? Selling B2B. I think is it software that you're selling, or what was the what
Yeah,
you're
that's
selling?
correct. So that's it's like enterprise grade software, mainly just accounting and finance.
Perfect. Yeah. So, basically SaaS, right? Selling SaaS. As an enterprise, there's so many different companies out there that do it and have positions for account executive, SDR. So this will give you some insight, guys, if you ever want to, go into these roles as opposed to the high ticket world. Elijah actually hit one of his highest months at 13K in a month as an SDR, which is, it's a crazy feat for somebody who's in an SDR role and has so many different tips that have helped even myself to understand appointment setting better, and I think will definitely help all you guys. So, yeah, I've obviously covered a bit of a brief there, Elijah, but if you could, talk us through if there's anything I've missed in the intro, anything that you want to talk about with your transition and how that went. Yeah, start us off.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, first of all, appreciate you for having me on here. Um, in terms of the transition period, I actually got into HTC, I want to say December of like 2022. No, sorry, January of 2022. I joined the UCM program. I joined one of the cohorts, and that's kind of how I got my start in the industry. I pretty much got in as a closer because I had previous, traditional sales experience, and it was a sketchy offer. It was like an Amazon, what do you call those automation stores? It was good money,
Oh, okay.
but obviously crashed after like 6 months or so. So I kind of was doing that, bouncing around offer to offer. At the same time, I was still trying to like go do my own thing. I was trying agency, Shopify, all that good stuff.
Right,
But
right.
then I, kind of got tired of having to go hopping offer to offer, juggling multiple offers. So I want something a bit more stable and long term. And last May 2023, that's when I officially got into the software industry. So that's just kind of like more of the nuance of what kind of happened. And then I got in here and I haven't looked back since. So yeah, it's been a good ride so far.
Absolutely. And of course, well, going from the high ticket world, which is obviously highly volatile,
Right, right.
then going into something that is a lot more stable. And yes, it is a job, but there is so much benefits to having that with a higher base and obviously very good commissions as well, because you're selling higher end packages, right? With, yes, longer sales cycles, but they do have an impact when they do sell. So, like, for you, if you could share with us, what are the key differences with being in high ticket versus being where you are now? What are some of the big things that you've noticed, even pros and cons, if you can share those?
Yeah, I think the main thing, like the biggest pro I found is it allows you to think more long term, right? Because like you said, the sales cycles are longer. And what I found is if I'm on an offer in HTC, I'm a setter, I'm thinking maybe I'll be there 3 to 6 months until I get to like closer, or I hop and go to somewhere else, right? Whereas here, you can actually really think long term, like 2, 3 years out, because by the time you go from an SDR to an AE, those accounts you were working as an SDR, you can work that as an AE now, and you have a lot of knowledge on that account, right? So that's one of the main things that I found to be a pro. In terms of con, you like there's a joke in the industry that if you want to hit your number and you want to make 300 400 a million a year, because we have guys at my company doing it in other companies, um it's really based on a few things, and one of them is territory, timing, and skill. Right, skill we have control over, but timing, meaning did you join this company when they're at their peak, when they're at the very very early stage, or when they're just decaying and it's time is about to expire. Just like with an offer, you might join at the worst time. um
Mm.
so that's the second piece, which is timing. And then territory, if I'm working the Midwest in America, that's probably not the most attractive place to be. Whereas you can be in California or New York or Miami, right? Those areas are more prone to, innovation, and they're trying new things, right? Whereas in the Midwest, all the stereotypes you think of the Midwest, right? So those are the key factors I've noticed, and those are kind of the cons. You can be put in the worst territory. Not to say you can't turn it around, but like that's definitely one of the cons. Um, but those are like the two main things that come to my mind. I'll pause there. I don't know if you have any questions or anything you want to like probe in on that, or if you want me to just kind of lay out some more pros and cons.
Yeah, I think because you mentioned a lot about like the outside stuff, like the industry, of course, like the difference
Yeah,
between them. But I suppose for you going more into skill, right?
yeah,
Selling on a high ticket offer versus selling a high-end enterprise, SaaS offer for a
Yeah.
like a corporate company. What have you noticed? And if there is anything, maybe it might be
hmm
the same, but what are the differences in the skill sets, the ways you approach conversations? Like, what is have you been noticing as far as differences there?
Yeah. So in every company, you're gonna have different segments, right? So you're gonna have SMB, which is like small and medium size, mid market, and then enterprise, right? So enterprise
Yeah.
are, Coca-Cola's, Deltas of the world, Boeing. Those are the companies I work. So that compared to like SMB, it's like night and day difference of skill. So I
Yeah.
have
I used to sell
fewer
SMBs
accounts.
actually for advertising, and it's just
Oh, I
like
remember you
speaking to
told
an
me,
old
yeah.
Joe, right? Like, Tom, Dick, and Harry. You don't speak to, it's like speaking to guys in the high ticket world. So totally
Right.
different.
If someone was coming as an appointment setter, they'll do very well in SMB because it translates over pretty well, right? But once you start
Yeah.
moving up, that's where one, you have less accounts and you don't have to do, excuse me, 100, 200 dials a day. It's more like 50 to 60 highly targeted calls, right? So the main difference is when you're talking to executives, you have to do a lot of research on on the account, right? So I'll go through what's called like a 10K report, right? If they're a publicly traded company, they have all the information there, like their risk factors, what's their biggest challenges. So I read through that. I, customize an email. I'll send it out to them, or I'll send a cold call, or I'll make a cold call regarding that. I didn't know that when I first started because I would literally just call a whole bunch of people and use my talk tracks, which kind of helped. But as I've been in the role longer, that's the biggest thing you have to have is the business acumen and know how to talk to executives, right? Because they get bombarded with calls all day. Like I had four people today hang up on me because they were just like, yeah, we don't take cold calls. So it's a bit tricky, and you have to be a lot more creative. And I can go to some examples of like how I was able to creatively, book meetings with like really big name companies. But that's like the main difference I've noticed when you're selling and calling to enterprise is you have to be more strategic, right? Because you'll hear that often, but it's tough to do at scale though when you have a monthly quota hanging over your head and you have pressures of hitting your KPIs because that's still there, right? So those are the
Yeah.
main differences I've noticed.
Yeah, because it's like I think from an outsider, the way I'm looking at it is obviously when you speak with guys in high ticket, it's like a brand new guy. You have a fresh conversation. You don't need to do any upfront work or research. Or I guess the strategy is more in how you have the conversation, right? Versus like
Correct.
when it
Yeah.
comes to corporate, you're doing upfront work probably to understand more about the business, the executive, what's important to them, what's not important to them, and then approaching that call with that strategy, right? So yeah, like let's dive into that then as far as the strategy side for the corporate calls.
Yeah, so and one thing I do want to say is, which is funny, I opted in for this ad I saw during the weekend. It was just something about I think it was like M&A or something like that. I'm just kind of interested in that. And
Oh, yeah, yeah.
within like 2 minutes, I had a setter call me, and as soon as he called me, he kind of just ran through. I can tell he was reading a script, and that can
Right.
fly in this world, right? Like in high ticket because you don't have to do that much research and stuff. But if I have a demo request coming in corporate, right? Of course you want to call it as soon as possible, right? Like speed to lead is important, but you want to know and have a good talk track. As far as like what it comes to strategy, you said, how do I go about research and being strategic? Was that the question?
Yeah, like doing the upfront work as well as having the conversation. Yeah, like a mixture of both.
Yeah. So in terms of the upfront work, typically it wouldn't take more than like 10, 15 minutes per company and per prospect, right? But let's say I'll give you a good one. I booked a meeting with Robinhood back in like September, right? Like the trading platform. And I was trying to
Yeah.
contact the director and the VP of accounting because those two were like the main people handling what I sell into. So I knew because Robinhood had gone public, I was able to like research the 10K. I was trying to see if they were expanding globally because that's another what we call trigger event that we have. So basically,
Right.
when there's a trigger event, I'm sure you might know that because you're selling into it, but for those that don't, that's basically me trying to find a reason why I should reach out, right? Again, if they're expanding globally, if they had a new acquisition they just made, I can reach out and say, hey, Taylor, I noticed you guys just made an acquisition and you're expanding globally. Brex can help with that. This is what we do. Would you be open to a chat? If that was via email. Um, I that's part of the research that goes into it, right? Reading their 10K report, acquisition, global expansion. That's the company level. And then going deeper on like a prospect level, there's not too much you can usually
Yeah.
find because I sell to finance and accounting. They're pretty, stale people. They don't post a lot, or you're not going to find a lot of information about them.
No, very
Um,
analytical.
yeah, so that's kind of how it is. But usually when I call them, my kind of talk track is basically I kind of have a mixture of Jeremy Miner stuff plus some people in my world of B2B. Um, so I'll just say like, hey Taylor, it's Elijah giving you a call. You're actually not expecting my call right now, but I was wondering if you could help me out for a brief moment. Rarely do I ever get turned down for that. And then from there, I would say something along the lines of, I was actually reaching out to you to see if I can find a more appropriate time to schedule a 20-minute call. Typically what always happens, they'll always say like, wait, I don't even know what you do. Like, tell me what you do, which is what I wanted
Yeah,
to say,
that's it. Invoking
right?
curiosity.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and then
Yeah.
they're like, so they always say like, well, tell me what you do. And now they give me good 10, 15 seconds to pitch and they can actually hear me. And I was actually explaining this to, I don't know if you know Nick Roberts. I was walking him through this, and at
Absolutely. Yeah.
first he didn't understand it, but then he got it when I showed him a few calls, because the whole idea is like, who's this person calling me, right? Like, so they're actually paying attention. So that's what I would do. And then I would say, oh, sorry, yeah, of course I should tell you what I do, right? I act naive. I tell them what I do, and then I would follow up with saying, hey, I'm sure a company of your size like Robinhood has solutions in place, which they always do. But have you ever experienced a tool like what we have here? And they usually say no, and then I have more follow-up probing questions and things like that. And generally calls aren't more than like 5 minutes, right? Like anything more than 5 minutes, that's a long time. Like that's a really good call.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Um,
otherwise you're not acting like you scheduled another call. Like you just wanted to keep them on there, right? Like you have other
yeah,
calls to make. That authority side that has to come from you as well is very important. And so
exactly.
there was one thing that I wanted to address that you said that was very important in your introduction. Because I think a lot of people, when I speak with some, where they're like, "Oh, how do I make that introduction on LinkedIn or that cold call or over the appointment?" And sometimes one of the most important things you can do is address the elephant of the situation. And
Yeah,
you said, "Oh, I know that you wasn't expecting my call." Right? That's literally addressing the big elephant in the room where most people are like, "Oh, why are you calling me like this out of the blue?" Like that's the
right,
main concern people have when they pick up. So for those of you that are trying to craft a very good introduction, you know, giving the context behind what's happened and addressing the elephant often will lead to people giving you more time, right? Because as a cold call, all you're trying to do is buy more time, right? Get
right.
more time in a conversation in order to get the important stuff said that at least leads to more curiosity from their side to even want to talk more, right?
Yeah,
When you clearly displayed that.
yeah, the funny thing about that, I had a guy yesterday. I didn't follow my script to a T, which I normally do. Because I use a dialer and like I had to hit my KPI, so I was just running through calls. So I wasn't really paying attention. And he picks up and I'm like, oh
Right.
shoot. And I talked and I forgot to say you weren't expecting my call. And the whole tone was like, okay, like he kept answering my questions. He's like, what's the purpose of this call? Right. So I forgot to kind of put that up front. So that's a good call out, right? Like that's something major because they're always just like, who's this person? Why are you calling me? Um, but at the same time too, I'm gonna start changing up my approach. Actually, tomorrow is gonna be my first day of doing coaching with this new guy. Yeah. So tomorrow I'm gonna be working with this guy. A few of my buddies recommended him a lot, and his approach is completely different when it comes to booking meetings, because he aims to add value on these calls. Because when you really think about it, now this is in my role, not necessarily high ticket, you're not really adding much value up front to the person when you're calling them, right? Because the main objection at the end of the day, it might not even be I have a tool in place, I'm running to a meeting. It's I'm worried you're going to waste my time, right? So this
Yeah,
guy,
100%.
his approach is he debriefs them on, and this whole thing, I won't go too deep into it, but he shows them the trends and the risks that might be coming into their industry in the next like 18 to 24 months, right? Because he does really highly researched work, right? And he says, Taylor, this is Elijah giving you a call from blah blah blah. I actually want to schedule 20 minutes with you to walk you through this executive briefing I have, to show you the trends and risks that might in fact affect your business in the next 12 to 24 months. Would you have 20 minutes later this week? Obviously, they're always going to say no, right? That's the first thing. But you tell them, you
Mhm.
de-risk it by saying, I'll show you this report. If we don't move forward or there's no next steps, I'll still give it to you. And a lot of people take it, right? Because when you walk them through that, it's not a traditional discovery call. So that's something new I'm going to be implementing to actually make it worth their while to attend these calls with people. Because again, my buddies have had success using this guy's method. So that's something new I'm going to be using. Obviously that won't apply though in HTC, because when that guy this weekend called me, he had value because like I opted in, right? So that's a whole different
Yeah,
motion,
exactly.
right?
The marketing is the most important part of HTC, right? Whereas when it's
Yeah.
corporate, you're very much building it from scratch. They have no idea who you are. It's the coldest form of building that relationship, right? So it's the emphasis on how good you are is more important.
Right. The one thing I will say on that, it definitely does help. Like when you have marketing, let's say if I'm calling you, I'm like, hey Taylor, it's Elijah from Google versus like, even
Yeah,
Brex, like we're not that well known. That
of
helps. It's
course.
still cold, but like, that's why I always, preach about working for like really, really good companies, because when you have a good brand name in your space, it makes it just a little bit easier. You still have to have the skill, right? But it never hurts to have a good reputation or brand on your resume.
Sure. No, absolutely. So that's really cool to cover like more of the skill stuff, and I guess diving into more of the transition, right? Because for some
Yeah,
people, being appointment setters, I've realized for us, we want stability. Oftentimes, I know
yeah,
when I was being an appointment setter, I did want that base, and I wanted the commissions to go on top because at the end of the day, my earnings are not a direct reflection of me. Sometimes it's based on the other people in the company to close those
yep,
deals for me, right? And so for those people that are wanting that maybe stability where they want a higher base and less commissions, and that's totally okay for those people. I know that there's people in the space who say, "Oh, you should only go commission only, fight for way less of a base."
right. I hear
That's a
that
battle that
often.
anyone can have, I'm sure. But for you, like, how did you like? What helped you to make that transition gradually? Like the
Yeah.
connections that you made, how you networked. For those that want to actually, get into corporate like yourself.
So there's a few ways. Like, I went through this guy. A few of my buddies recommended this guy. And he has kind of like a boot camp, as they call it, like in this industry, where he walks you through. It's basically like an offer, right? His offer is like, I'll help you get into a corporate role, and he basically showed me how to cold email and basically do. We call it doing the job to get the job, right? So I would call my
Yeah,
manager or I'd
absolutely.
email my manager to get the job, and then if I get him on the phone, I'll be like, hey. I'm trying to schedule time with you to interview for this role. I wanted to, I always say this as part of my line. I'll say like, "Hey Taylor, I'm basically calling you, showing you I can do the job to get the job." And they always chuckle at that, right? So, I actually cold emailed my hiring manager and the recruiter, and literally same day the next day they interviewed me, and then within a week I got the role. Um, but the main way to do it, it is getting more saturated, like that approach. So people are doing more and more creative things to kind of stand out, right? But there were probably 4 or 5 guys I helped get in. One of my buddies actually, he might be watching this. He might be moving to the last round at a really good company, using the same approach, right? Just reaching out to the hiring managers on LinkedIn, finding their information via a tool called ZoomInfo or Apollo, right? The databases. That's kind of
Mhm.
what I use as well. In terms of the transition period, I was actually talking to Nick and a few other people about this. If you come from HTC, you'd crush it in corporate because here they don't take their role as serious, right? That is one thing I do like about the when it's usually commission only. That usually weeds out. And again, I don't like because I'm not one to say, oh, if you have commission only and you have base, you're weak, right? Because obviously I have base, but generally speaking, it does weed out, the serious people from the not so serious. Whereas here they have a
Sure.
really good base. Like some of them are getting like 150 base, right? So they're pretty much relaxed. Um, so I would say it is easier to make that transition, right? Especially if you're a closer, and then you kind of have to, because like usually if you're a closer, which I was, they still want you to start out as an SDR because if you don't have closing experience in SaaS, to them like they don't care, like they'll never take you. So if you start as an SDR like myself, because you have so many disco calls and repetitions, it's so much easier to make outbound calls and then work your way up, like I'm pretty much doing.
Absolutely, and it just like when you were saying that, it brought a thought about because I can imagine a lot of people that are within that the SaaS space and for enterprises, they probably maybe not invested in programs before,
Yeah,
right, or never even thought about investing in themselves because the company's always got so much support. Whereas in the
right.
HTC space, if you do not invest money into your own abilities, you are going to sink. That is the reality, right? And
Exactly.
like I say that having invested nearly, I'm at probably invested about 26K in the last 2 years on
Pounds
improving
or like
myself.
dollars?
Yeah, dollars. Yeah, like
Oh
you know what
wow.
it is. I
Okay.
live in the UK, but I still think in dollars. Like I don't think in pounds anymore. I speak
Yeah.
to my wife and I say, yeah, so like this thing is like $2,600. She's like, babe, we literally live in England. Like say in pounds, and I always forget every
Right.
single time.
No,
But
it's
yeah,
funny. I
so
know I know a few AEs because I went through back in September. I went through probably since I started here, I want to say little under like 12K. I probably my total investments like mentorship programs and stuff probably just a little over that, probably like around like 36, 40 probably by now. Like I've been around the block, like buying stuff, right? But I remember there was one guy in particular here in this industry, really good guy. He showed me how to do what we call like top of funnel, right? So like the prospecting side. And he only charged me 1,000, but he has another program for like AEs, which it's the prospecting plus the closing discovery. And I told two of the AEs here who these guys, they're like serious, right? They cold call with me, they invest in like programs, they do all that stuff. And mind you, these guys make a really good pay, like 250, 350. That's their total OTE, 50-50 split. And when
right,
when I told him to go talk to the guy who coached me, he gave him the price. He said like, it's 8,500. I'm thinking that's a steal because like that's a usual HTC program, right? Like a usual sales program. And
Yeah.
this guy he was ready to cry about it because he's like, yo, I really want to do it, but I gotta talk to my wife and all this stuff. He's telling me this. And I was like, hey, like I respect that you got to do all that, but like, come on, what are we doing here, kind of thing. Because this guy, he's really big in like our space and he really knows his stuff. So 8,500 for his time is for a year, it was a steal, but they just
Wow.
can't get over that. One last thing on that piece of investing, if you work at a really, typically big company like Salesforce or Oracle or something, they actually have an educational budget, which we do as well, but it's not like that high. Because if you invest in a 10K program, they reimburse you for that if you complete it, right? So
Yeah.
bigger companies, they incentivize that as well.
There we go. So it sounds like the space, like the enterprise space, SaaS, it's a great space to be a part of. So I guess for any of
100%.
those guys that are out there that are looking to do what you have done,
Mhm.
what main key advices would you give them?
So I do have a post about it that I made on Facebook. I actually tagged it. The main things you're looking for, right, when it comes to, breaking into this industry. One, you want to join a really good company, right? And that's a vague term, I know, but like a really good company means you're selling a software that's a need, not a nice to have. Quick example, I had a buddy who reached out to me saying like, hey, can you train me on some SDR stuff? And I asked him, what do you sell? And the software, what it did was it was a paywall for newsletters, right? So you're not really solving a pain there. It's just like a little nice to have.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
100%.
it's really small. Whereas if you're selling like what's called like a ERP, which is a enterprise resource planning tool, that's huge, right? Like that's a must have. So that's the first thing, right? Work for a company that uh has a really good need kind of software. The other would be make sure you do your due diligence on a tool or a website called RepVue. So that's REP View RUE. I'm
Very
sure you
good.
heard of
Yeah,
it.
I've used that
Yeah,
myself. Yeah.
because that shows you the quota attainment at these companies. And then the third and last thing is like make sure you really vet out the company, make sure there's a clear path to AE. People are hitting quota. No one is never going to be 100%, but you want 60% of the team usually to be hitting quota. Those are the
Yeah.
three main things I would say that I would look for and that I would advise on.
Excellent. All right. Well, I wish you had more time, Elijah, but this has been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing those pearls of wisdom. And for any of you guys out there that, you maybe have been a bit sick of the high ticket space as of recent, and you guys want to make that transition to corporate, Elijah's the only guy that I know who's been able to post about it and actually, done, what he's set out to do with it. So definitely feel free to reach out. If guys do want to reach you, I'm assuming Facebook is the best way, and I can drop the link below. Or is there any other ways to reach you?
Correct. Yeah, Facebook is as well as LinkedIn. That's another tip I would give you if you guys are going to break into the space. You kind of have to be on LinkedIn more. I know LinkedIn's usually a cringe fest and people don't like it, which is true, but that's where all the decisions kind of happen. So LinkedIn and Facebook is the best way to reach me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, excellent. So, yeah, guys, if you really liked this, then obviously make sure to like the video. Please comment as far as the best takeaway that you got from this. And yeah, share it because I think more people need to hear about this, right? Especially if they're sick and tired of the high ticket space and want a lot more of that stability. So, definitely share the video as well. And then, yes, make sure to give a lot of credit to Elijah and reach out if you guys need any help. So, I'll leave you to it and we'll get on to the next episode. Take care, guys.